an anecdote. And it's a story about the Reverend Jason Shelton, who serves our UU congregation in Nashville, Tennessee. And about 14 years ago, he wrote a song. You might all know of it, Standing on the Side of Love. It's very popular, so I hear. Well, long before it was number 1014 in our teal hymnal, it was a song he intended to strengthen us as we waged war against the fierce marriage equality debates of the time. That's the context in which he's writing the song. And I still remember the first time that I heard it. I was at Interweave's Convo. Interweave is a national organization of GLBT and sometimes queer. They haven't always adopted that term, Unitarian Universalist. And they have a big national meeting that's called the Convo. And so at the closing worship of that Convo, we sang Standing on the Side of Love, the first time that I had sang it in church. It was the only song we sang together that entire service. Opening hymn, middle hymn, closing hymn, benedictory hymn. It was, we really liked the song. It hit us. Well, over time, Standing on the Side of Love gained immense popularity, as you well know, and it transformed into something akin to a UU theme song. Well, we sang it all over the place. We even changed the words of another hymn in the teal hymnal, Siahamba, and started singing, "We are marching on the side of love, we are marching on..." We did everything. We loved this song. And so eventually the song lent its name to our national movement for marriage equality, which itself then transformed into our national movement for social justice. And then we started selling those boldly tinted yellow shirts. And that increased our visibility as UUs at marches and protests and actions. But the beloved hymn and the campaign named after it were deeply hurtful to our siblings and cousins with disabilities. And they let us know about this hurt for close to a decade before we did anything about it. Only about a year and a half ago have we started to make any changes. So, UUs, as well-meaning as we are, we have some fundamental problems with accountability. Hear me out. In an oversimplification of what it means to share our own truths freely, we can forget that simply having a truth to share does not make our own understandings of the world universal, nor do they supersede the lived experiences of those most directly impacted by our actions, our words, and activism. You do not have the market cornered on truth. Now, the Reverend Nancy McDonald Ladd speaks to this reality in our call to worship. When we place barriers around ourselves with highly specific conditional statements for engaging with one another, we compromise our ability to engage in community authentically. That is, to respond to healing a fragmented world. Now, this is not to say that we cannot spell out for others what brings us joy or what discomforts us, or even what enhances communication for us and what leads to us shutting down. However, when we have privileged identities of ability or class or gender or race, we all need to learn how to deal with a lot more discomfort. Justice making is uncomfortable. Community building is uncomfortable. Dismantling institutions that serve some very well and others not at all is uncomfortable for the powerful who benefited from those institutions. In all cases, we are giving up privileges, possessions, or access so that everyone can be free. We are losing some of our individualism so that everyone can have more collectively. So finally responding to the calls of our siblings and cousins with disabilities, in the summer of 2016, the Reverend Jason Shelton officially changed the title of Standing on the Side of Love to Answering the Call of Love. We will not be reprinting it in the Teal Hymnal until we issue a second edition. But in all future versions of the song, he's only releasing it as Answering the Call of Love. Now, in the sermon he preached on the topic, it's only available in video form. He preached extemporaneously, and no one ever transcribed his sermon. In the sermon he preached on this, he references the fact that when we seek to make justice, sometimes we mess up. Anyone ever messed up trying to make justice? Yeah, I mess up quite a bit. And as Unitarian Universalists, we are called to live up to our promises of being welcoming, and I would even add of being transformative. We are called to live up to our promises of being welcoming as well as being transformative. And we must expect to mess up as we try to expand the experiences of justice when we're using tools and living lives that have been shaped by injustice. I'll say that again. We must expect to mess up as we try to expand the experience of justice when we're using tools and living lives that have been shaped, impacted, molded, deeply intertwined, woven and wrought by injustice. Nonetheless, that is not an excuse for resisting change or failing to respond to the systemic oppression that those at the margins are telling us they're experiencing. They have told us they're experiencing. They still tell us they're experiencing. And so the Reverend Shelton's announcement was met with some hostility, because after years of being complicit to the system of ableism, we couldn't just dial back the defenses that had been offered for more than a decade. Those defenses included, well, it's poetry. It's a metaphor. We don't mean actual standing. It's taking a stand on an issue, which is about actual standing. But we love the song, and it's difficult to sing another way. Now this, whom are we worried about offending next? You fill in the blank. We said this. We reacted this way. And so UUs had the same responses last summer on the General Assembly floor as we debated sending a request to our Unitarian Universalist Association staff to change the title of the Standing on the Side of Love campaign. Incidentally, we spent close to an hour doing that. The staff were already working on the request. We were already going to change it. And we spent close to an hour deciding whether we wanted to change it. And UUs have had a similar response to the announcement of our UUA earlier this month, that we have officially changed the name of the Standing on the Side of Love campaign to Side with Love. Isn't it curious that just and loving people could be so upset about actually answering the calls for justice from disability rights activists and people with disabilities with whom we worship, nurture the next generation, and attempt to build the beloved community? Isn't that curious? And I understand the arguments around changing language and the fear that we won't ever get it right. So why bother? We won't ever get it just right. It's okay. All right? When we try, and each time we try, we get a little bit closer to being more whole. That's why we do it. We change the language, we keep up with the times, we respond to the requests of our siblings and cousins living on the margins, because we get a little bit more whole every time we try. And we won't ever get it just right, but naming is important. We were meant to be known by our names. Naming is both an act of power and of resilience. The name change in this way is also challenging because, as the press release of our UUA states, Side with Love raises provocative questions, including, when have I sided with love? When have I shirked siding with love? When have I chosen the side of comfort, apathy, despair, and acquiescence instead of the side of faith, risk, sacrifice, and resistance? Earlier, the release also offers, side with love is an invitation and a challenge. A recognition that in many moments there are two sides, one of love and one of oppression and violence. We are always bound up in messy webs alongside even those who perpetrate hate, they continue. And daily, we choose whether we are siding with love, freedom, liberation, reparations, and integrity, or whether we are siding with the violence of white supremacy, patriarchy, ableism, and heterosexism. When we change the language we use in these ways, we also have to come to terms with the reality that however subtle, our communities were not choosing the side of love. And this realization can be terrifying for liberal justice seekers like us. Moreover, identifying the side of love is challenging, especially if you thought you were always on the side of love. And then something you do as an individual, or even more significantly, something we do collectively, causes or exacerbates harm to people and communities we care about when they trusted us, when they invited us into partnership, when they expected more from us, because we said we were ready, willing, and able. And when we have chosen the side of violence, inadvertently or on purpose, and now feel compelled once again to side with love, we might need to cope with feelings of embarrassment, shame, anger, guilt, exasperation, defensiveness, or hey, even elation. Whatever you feel, it is right and true for you. But feel your feelings and then get to work. The side of love needs your whole being. We make more justice together. Love means working with others, sharing power and building institutions that fortify our spirits for the joys and sorrows that lay ahead. Love is consensual and requires you proclaim each and every day, I choose you. You say that with me? I choose you. In this way, we become humbled by what we do not yet know, recalls the Reverend Alicia Ford from our reading this morning. When we work together on this side, we can fulfill the promise of healing a fragmented world by enjoining hopefulness with love. We are all needed in this work of transforming love and hate into love and then love into justice. And the work will be hard at times because the old ways no longer serve. We can't unknow what we know, and we can't undo what we've done. You will be required to give things up that you cherish that are both physical and intangible. For there cannot be enough for everyone, while some people have most of the resources and others go wanting. Yet fear not, my friends. The work is worthwhile. The work is worthwhile because the end state is freedom, true and glorious freedom. True and glorious freedom that will make us wonder why we didn't all choose the side of love in the first place. It's that liberating. And I know what side we all want to be on. And I wish that simply the desire to be on the side of love were enough, but it is not. Each day we are presented with challenges for how we choose to side. And we will not always immediately know the impact of our choices. But you must choose love. must choose love, for we hurt one another when we do not choose that side. You must choose love because it is easier to make a mistake when you are open to being forgiven. Choose love because the stakes are very high. Our wholeness depends on it. Choose wisely, friends. Amen. Blessed be.
We're going to